Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. The heart behind this podcast is to encourage and equip you to discover your God-given purpose by sharing talks with people blazing trails right where they are. Each week, you'll hear from me and different guests on the show to talk about life, purpose, God, leadership, and a whole lot in between. I love having conversations with people, and I'm excited to get to bring you into those. My hope is that you'll grow and become poised for purpose. I hope each week that you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Trailblazer Talks. This week, I'm excited to talk to you guys about something that's near and dear to my heart and something that I've been learning a lot more about this year. This week, I want to talk to you guys all about mental health and talk to you guys about my own story with mental health and anxiety and depression, and just talk about the different struggles that have been going on this year. And I want to preface this episode by saying that I am not a licensed professional. I am not a medical professional. And if this is something that you struggle with, I definitely recommend talking to your doctor or talking to a licensed professional or a counselor about this. This week, I just wanted to open up about my own story and share it in hopes that maybe it will help you in your own journey with mental health. So I hope that this episode is helpful for you, and I hope that it helps you know, above all else, that you are not alone. My hope in the future is to get somebody on here who is a counselor or who can speak into this from more of a professional or medical aspect. But this week, I'm just going to be telling my own story in hopes that it will help you right where you're at as well. So for me, I have struggled with anxiety for most of my adult life. I've probably struggled with it my whole life, actually, after talking to my mom about my struggles, just realizing as a kid, I struggle with different social anxiety situations where being a shy kid, I struggled if my mom asked me to go do something, like go up to the front desk and ask for something or anything like that. I got a lot of anxiety from that. I also, as a kid, being an introvert, I would get anxiety trying to go to big situations where there was a lot of people that I didn't know and I had to talk to people, which I was in a lot of those situations because I went to a lot of events with my mom for her work. But those were things that my mom helped me with and different people helped coach me through to help overcome some of those social anxieties. And a lot of people can blame that on being an introvert or whatever, but I think some of those things you can definitely be coached on and grow in your struggle with so that it's not so severe. And as I've gotten older, those types of struggles have definitely gotten easier for me, where now if I go into certain situations where it's a crowd of people that I don't know a single person and I'm by myself, I'm still introverted in the fact that I get my energy from within versus from other people. I'm what you call an outgoing introvert, so I love being around people. I'm definitely more outgoing, but I also really love my alone time. But those types of things I've definitely overcome. But where I started to really notice that I actually struggled with high functioning anxiety, which is a form of anxiety. It's definitely more of a new term for anxiety. There's different types of struggles with anxiety that you can look into. But for me, the struggle that I have is called high functioning anxiety. And it's basically where I have a very loud inner critic. I am really hard on myself, and I have a lot of just really intense thoughts going on in my head at a time, and striving to be good and striving to do my best and striving to there's just a lot of striving, as you can tell, that goes on with that type of anxiety. And the unknown is really hard because I like to know the outcome of a situation so I can best prepare for how to react to situations. So that's the type of anxiety that I tend to struggle with. And I realized more that I started struggling with it after, probably in college, but more so after college. I struggled with it in college, definitely around test anxiety and taking tests and that type of thing. But more so after graduating college and getting into the real world, I started struggling with it more with the expectations I put on myself with my job. And I noticed that anytime there were a lot of things on my plate, I typically carry a pretty heavy load when it comes to all the things that I say yes to and all the things that I'm able to do at one time. But I also put a lot of pressure on myself to do it well and to be the best. And so that often tends to become an anxiety struggle for me, where I say yes to a lot of things at once and I'm performing really well and doing it all really well. But then, one straw breaks the camel's back and I end up in the bathroom sitting on the floor with a panic attack. And so that's only happened to me, having panic attacks. That's only happened to me maybe 2 or 3 times in my whole career, and I've been out of college since 2014. But usually that's whenever I had a really high pressure, high intense type of environment where I had a lot of expectations on me, and I also am the kind of person who hates getting in trouble. And I think that's because I'm a type 1 on the Enneagram. I don't like to get in trouble. I don't like for anything to be wrong with me necessarily. And so for me, it's really hard if I do something that I feel like someone's disappointed in me for, or I do something where I make a mistake or whatever. I think I'm harder on myself than anybody else. So if you relate to that, hopefully this episode can help you. For me, it was situations like that at work where I had a very high profile type of project, or a very anxious type of project where it was a lot of quick deadlines and we had to get a lot done really quickly. And I felt like I either dropped the ball on something, or I felt like I didn't meet expectations, or I've had to learn how to take feedback in a way that doesn't cause me to get anxiety. I've had to learn that it's okay to mess up and I don't have to be perfect. So a lot of my struggle with anxiety has come mostly from high stress type of environments at work, where I just put a lot of pressure on myself, and the project itself was also very high pressured. So that's been more of my struggle with anxiety, and I still actively struggle with it. It's something that I've gotten better control over the past probably couple of years, but it's also something I've noticed more in the past few years as I've better understood what anxiety is and what it looks like. And I've also struggled with depression before. I have struggled with it different times in my life. There definitely are some times where there's more seasonal type of depression that I struggle with, but I struggled with it more prevalently in 2016. I had a really bad struggle with it then, and I really didn't even understand at the time. I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression type of symptoms at that time, but I just got to a point in 2016, and I was actually, I was following Jesus and doing all the different things with following my purpose and all that kind of stuff, but I just kind of hit this roadblock where I just felt really purposeless in this one season, and there was a lot going on in that season. Work was really stressful, and I didn't really know what direction I was going with my life, and I was living in Birmingham, and I just got to this point where I felt like my hope was being attacked, and which is pretty ironic because my middle name is actually Hope, but I felt like my hope was being attacked at that time, and I just got to this really low place, and I definitely had thoughts where I questioned, what am I even doing here? What's the point of even living and stuff like that? And if you ever get to that point, there's a national suicide hotline, and you need to talk to a trained professional about that and not be afraid to open up about the struggles that you're having. I remember I called in sick to work one day on a day where I just was feeling really, really low and just feeling really, really purposeless. I was really struggling that day, and so I did the hard thing, and I reached out to my mentor, and I let her in on what I was feeling. And I let her know that I really needed to talk to her, and when could she talk, because I just was really not feeling like myself, and I was really feeling just very low at that point and just very hopeless. And so I ended up meeting with my mentor, and I realized that my hope was being attacked. And that was where really kind of that journey for me that I talked about a couple episodes ago about overcoming lies, that's where that really came into play for me, because I realized I was believing a lot of lies at that time in my life. I was believing a lot of things about myself that weren't true. There's a lot of things that I just hadn't dealt with yet from my past and stuff like that. And I was holding myself to an impossible standard. So she challenged me. It was so funny. I remember that day clear as day, because it was the day after the 2016 election. We met at 6:30 in the morning at Panera Bread, and I was trying to stay strong because I hate crying in front of people, and I was trying to hold it all together. And she looked at me and she was like, Courtney, I feel like God told me before we got here that your hope is being attacked. And I just started crying. I started bawling my eyes out in Panera, and I probably looked like a crazy person. It probably looked like I was crying because of who just got elected. But really, I was crying because she hit the nail on the head. I felt like my hope was being attacked, and I was in a really depressive season. And I remember everything changed that day. I remember that she challenged me and told me to go home and write down every lie that I felt like I was believing about myself, and every lie that I felt like people had spoken over my life and stuff like that. And then she had told me to then find scripture to help overcome those lies. And then she prayed with me, and we talked several other times about it, and she helped me overcome a lot in that season. And then I decided to go to counseling. And that's something that I would really advise everybody on, even if you're not struggling with mental health. I think it's really important to go to a counselor, no matter if you're in a really hard season or not. I think it's really smart to go to counseling as much as you can afford to do so. I love counseling. It really helped me in that season as well, because I just needed an outside person's opinion who was a trained professional to give me some tools to put in my tool belt in order to overcome all the things that I was dealing with in that season. And it was really helpful. I was able to go to counseling in that season, and my counselor gave me some really great tips and tricks to really help overcome the depression in that season and the anxiety. And I'm not currently going to counseling, but I really want to start going back soon. Unfortunately, counseling can cost a lot of money, so it's definitely an investment. And I would say don't let money be an issue if it's something that you really, really need. There's a lot of counseling places out there that have plans where it's on a sliding scale and different things like that, and different companies offer different types of mental health care. But I definitely recommend going to a Christian counselor if you're looking to seek counseling, because I think it's really important to meet with a counselor who shares your beliefs in God, because I think that's definitely a huge factor in this whole equation whenever you think about mental health. I think a lot of times people try to separate mental health from their Christianity, but I think it goes hand in hand. And I also think the church needs to talk about mental health more. I think it's something that unfortunately isn't talked about enough in the church, and it makes Christians sometimes feel like they're a bad Christian just because they struggle with mental health. And I want to tell you right now, please listen to me. If you struggle with mental health, that does not make you a bad Christian. It doesn't make you a weak Christian. It doesn't mean that you're not mature enough. It doesn't mean that you don't love God enough. It means that you struggle with mental health and you love Jesus. So please hear that, and please know that wherever you are in your struggle today, it doesn't make you any less of a Christian or any less of anything. You are strong and you are here for a reason, and I hope that you hear that today. And I hope that by hearing my story, it helps you understand that more people struggle with mental health than you realize. I think it's hard for me because a lot of people look at my life and look at me and think that, oh, she's got it all together, she's successful, she has a podcast and she has this influencer, whatever, on Instagram and all this different stuff. But just know that everybody struggles with different things, and I struggle with mental health as well. And anxiety is still something I struggle with, and even depression from time to time. I haven't had a severe struggle like I did in 2016 since 2016, but I have struggled with different seasons of just feeling more low and feeling those feelings of depression. But anxiety is more of a severe struggle for me. And this year, I think we all have struggled with mental health, to be honest. It's been a really hard year, y'all. This whole year of 2020, I was reading some statistics earlier when I was doing some research before recording this episode. More than 31% of U.S. adults struggle with anxiety and depression symptoms. And during late June this year, 40% of all U.S. adults reported struggling with mental health or substance abuse. And I've also heard that this year, mental health struggles have almost doubled or tripled. So that just goes to show you how much something like a global pandemic has an effect on our mental health. We were not made to be isolated. We weren't made to be alone. We were made to be in community. So I hope that my story helps you, and I want to give some tips as well, which is what I'm about to get into. But I wanted to start off with my story because sometimes I think it helps to understand where someone's coming from, to know kind of what authority they have to speak into something. So just know that I'm not speaking into this from a I have a perfect life. Here's some tips that I think you can use to help you overcome your mental health or improve your mental health. I'm telling this from I struggle too, and these are things that I try to do in my own life that can hopefully help you in yours. And I still struggle, but it's a battle that I face every day, but it's something that I'm getting better at and doing the work to try to overcome. So I hope that you hear that whenever you hear my story. Anxiety is something that I've been struggling with more over the past few months. This year has been really hard for me as well. And to be honest, it's really been a struggle this year. I've really struggled with my anxiety more than probably ever before, just from a more frequent basis. I think before this pandemic, I struggled with anxiety from more of putting pressure on myself at work and putting pressure on myself with all of my goals and dreams. But this year, it's been more of I don't really know why I'm struggling, but I'm struggling type of situation. And I think I talked about this on another episode, or maybe I just talked about it on Instagram. I don't really remember, but I'll say it again because I think it's really helpful. I think this year I've heard this story told, and I heard it from my pastor, but this year, I think a lot of us looked at the pandemic as a blizzard, and we just did everything we could to react to this quote unquote storm, and we thought it was going to be very temporary. And whenever it prolonged itself, it became more of a winter, and that's really the kind of season that we're in. We don't know how long the winter is going to last, but we need to treat it like it's more long-term versus temporary so that we can create better rhythms and better systems in our life to help us have a better mental health. So I think it's really important to prioritize your mental health in this season and make sure that you are doing the steps necessary in order to help yourself in this season. I know for me, whenever this season started, I had all these hopes and goals and dreams for this year. I thought 2020 was going to be the best year ever, and I just was really expectant for this season. And then March rolled around, and all the trips I had planned for this year ended up having to get canceled, and I went into a very busy season at work and with my church and the volunteer stuff I do, and I just kind of hit the ground running. So I really didn't have time to stop and think about how I was feeling or taking care of myself as much. I was doing great in my relationship with God, but I really wasn't stopping to think about my mental health. I just kind of kept going, and that's something that I'm pretty bad about. Is I say yes a lot, and I go until I hit a wall. And that's kind of what happened to me this year. I was just going and I was helping everybody else, but I wasn't really stopping to do the number one rule they tell you on an airplane, which is to help yourself first. Probably about April, I started hitting a little bit of a wall. I was designing a lot of stuff for graphic design. I was doing a lot at work for all of the signage that we needed at work, for all the marketing stuff. And I was just constantly saying yes to everybody else. And I started realizing I was kind of getting a little depressed in that season. I started realizing I was getting very anxious. I was getting all these hot flashes, and I was having my heart started having weird extra beats and stuff like that. And I really had to take a step back and realize whoa, I think my mental health is not in a good place right now. And as a 1 on the Enneagram, we often, when we're not healthy, we revert into an unhealthy 4. So it means we're extra critical, extra emotional, extra everything. And so I realized that that's the place that I started getting into. And May rolled around, and I was getting discouraged with a lot of different things, and realized I hadn't really grieved all the things that I hoped this year would be. So I had to take time to pause and kind of take a step back and take the pressure off of myself and grieve the things that I thought this year was going to have and going to be, and kind of move forward from there. And then after I did that, I realized that this year is just going to be a little bit of a struggle. And, everything else started happening around May and June with all the tension in our country and just all the heartbreak from that. And I feel things very, very deeply. I'm a very deep feeler, even if I don't show it on the surface. And I was just very grieved by all the unrest and just all the hurt happening in our country, and just feeling the emotions from just all the disunity and just all the hurt happening to people in our country and around the world. And I realized that social media was becoming a really unhealthy place for me, and I was needing to take more breaks from social media. So I feel like if you're in that place this year, it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to know that you don't have to chime in on every single conversation going on the internet and all of that different stuff. That it really is important to make sure that you're taking care of your mental health. So with all of that being said about this year, hopefully you relate, maybe you don't. Hopefully this episode is helpful, but I wanted to get into some actual practical tips to help you as well, because I feel like that's really important to know kind of, okay, like you struggle, I struggle, how do we actually move forward and how do we actually keep doing our best to overcome this battle of mental health. So I wanted to talk about some things that were helpful for me. I know for me, I have a very loud inner critic, and you've probably heard me say that a lot in this episode, and you've heard me say it before, but that's definitely something that is a struggle for me. Is I'm very, very hard on myself. And so I know that I have to be careful how I talk to myself. So that's the first thing I would say, is take note of how you talk to yourself. Make sure that you are being kind to yourself, because how you talk to yourself matters. If you catch yourself talking bad to yourself or being hard on yourself, it's really important to make sure that you are talking kindly and speaking life over yourself. Make sure that you're speaking God's truth over your life. And also making sure that you are constantly evaluating the things that you are letting into your mind and the things that are potentially triggers for you. I know for me, a trigger for anxiety can be whenever I have a lot of different people asking me for a lot of different things all at once. And that's not really on them, because they have no idea that 5 other people are also asking me to do stuff. But it's up to me to understand that I know that's a trigger for me, and that I don't have to respond to every single person all at once. I can stagger my responses, and I'm not going to be letting anybody down. And so I think it's understanding what are the things that trigger you whenever you have depression or anxiety or anything like that. Maybe it's OCD that you struggle with, but taking a inventory of your triggers and writing it down, and better understanding the things that kind of put you in that mental headspace, so that way you know whenever stuff like that happens, you can kind of prepare yourself and help coach yourself through it. Also knowing that it's okay if you need to take medicine or anything like that for your mental health. Like, just because you take medicine does not make you a bad Christian or mean that you don't trust God to heal you. I believe that God made doctors, and I believe that God often does miracles through medicine. So I think that don't allow the stigma of mental health to keep you from getting the help that you might need in order to help you get on the right track. And also don't let the stigma of counseling do the same thing. I think it's really important and really wise to go to counseling, even when you're not in a tough spot. I think it's preparing you to go. If you go before you need it, it's preparing you for whenever you really do need it. So it's putting the fire out before the fire even gets started. Also, some other things that are helpful for me is whenever I start feeling really anxious, one, I pray and I talk to God about it. Then I clue in a friend. So make sure that you have community. Make sure you have a safe person that you can ask to join with you in prayer and ask to clue you in on how you're feeling. And if you have a counselor, let that person be your counselor. But for me, since I don't have a counselor at this current moment, I text my best friend and I just kind of clue her in on kind of where I'm at that day and let her know, like, hey, I'm not feeling my best today, or hey, I'm feeling pretty anxious today. Could you please pray for me? And then whenever I'm ready, her and I will talk, and we'll kind of talk through the different feelings of what might have been causing me anxiety that day, so that I have a battle plan. And that's the other thing I would say, is have a battle plan. It's really important that you have a battle plan, so that before you ever have a day where you're feeling more anxious, or before you ever have a day where you're feeling more depressed, that you have a battle plan in place of things that you can do that are very helpful for you to overcome that day. So for me, that looks like what I just talked about with praying first and then reaching out to a friend. And some other things I do is whenever I start to get anxious, I walk away from whatever it is I'm working on. So if it's something I'm working on at work, or for something outside of work or whatever, I go take a little break and I find something to still my mind. So sometimes I will literally just look out the window and watch the trees and watch the leaves blow on the tree and listen to some worship music. Other times I go and watch an old episode of something that makes me really happy, or like a YouTube video that makes me really happy. And then other times I will just have a 30-second dance break. I will turn on a really fun song. Usually for me, it's Want to Dance with Somebody. is one of my favorites to dance to and just kind of shake it off and get my mind to just refocus on something else. And then something else I like to do is write down every thought that's making me anxious. So I'll get a piece of paper and I'll write down everything that's causing me to feel anxious at that time. And I'll look at the list and see if there's anything on that list that I can actually change right in that moment. And if it's stuff that I can't change, I decide if it's something I can live with or if it's something that I need answers to or something that I need, and I pray about it again, and I let those thoughts go, because a lot of times when you're feeling anxious, it just feels like you have a zillion thoughts going in every different direction. So those are some things that I do whenever I'm feeling anxious. And then sometimes I literally need to take a mental health day, or I need to take a mental health afternoon. And there should be no shame with that, because mental health is just as important as physical health. And we need to end the stigma that mental health means you're weak or that you can't cope, because that's not true. So if you need to take a mental health sick day or a mental health sick day afternoon, if you're not feeling your best, I highly recommend it. And go take a nap or go do something that will help ease your anxiety. And stop and take several deep breaths and focus on your breathing. That's something else that I do. So I hope that those tips are helpful for you with the different things that you might be feeling or facing with anxiousness. And I hope that it helps you with just better understanding how anxiety can form. And I definitely recommend looking up online just the different symptoms of anxiety, because that was really helpful for me. Because I remember over the past 6 months, I would get random hot flashes and I wouldn't have a fever, but because of COVID, I would get nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have a fever right now? Like, I would take my temperature like 6 times and it was always 97 degrees. And I finally understood that that was actually a reaction to anxiety, is getting hot flashes and all of a sudden feeling very hot and clammy, and it's not actually a fever. But because I would all of a sudden think about COVID, then all of a sudden I would start getting anxious even more, thinking, oh my gosh, do I have COVID? So thankfully I did not, but that was something that I had to learn, is the different symptoms and different things about anxiety, so that I kind of better understood how my body was reacting. So it's a journey, and it's something that you have to overcome in different ways, and you have to overcome with God and just keep praying through. But I highly recommend knowing your triggers and having counseling and having safe community that you can talk to, and praying and seeking God about it, and also getting the help that you need medically. Some additional things you can do in your battle plan is just creating different disciplines. So for me, some disciplines that I'm currently working on in my own life is going to bed at a better hour and making sure that I'm getting up early or in enough time so that I can get everything done in the morning that I want to do and start my day off right. So for me, I've been trying to wake up between 5:30 and 6 and start my day off without being rushed. So I start my day off with doing my Devo time with God and praying and listening to worship music and reading my Bible, and then making a good breakfast, and then working out. So being physical also really helps me with my mental health, and having a good routine helps me as well. So having a routine that I stick to daily really helps me with my mental health, so that I have something in place to help ease the unknown, because a lot of anxiety comes from unknown factors in our life, or the what ifs in life, or the worries. So having a routine and having different disciplines in place also helps me, and having boundaries helps as well. So for me, I do a lot outside of my 9-to-5 job. So I help with my church, with their graphics, and I also have a lot of my own things that you see me do, like this podcast and all the stuff you see me do online. And so for me, I started putting boundaries in place where I don't work on stuff for anything after like 8:45 or 9 o'clock. After that, I shut it down, and I either start getting ready for bed, or I read a book, or watch an episode on TV, or I talk to a friend or something like that. But I basically stop working on stuff after 9 o'clock at night, so that I can make sure I'm not working so late on different things, because I already work a 9-to-5 job. And then I have certain nights a week where I like don't do stuff. And so that might look different for you. Maybe your schedule's not as busy as mine. Maybe you don't have as many outside commitments, but whatever it is for your life, I would just evaluate your time and your schedule and find some ways to create some routines and disciplines and boundaries in your own life to help ease your anxiety. So the last thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is social media and comparison and overwhelm and the pressure to prove or keep up. And I know that social media this year has been such a crazy place. For me, I have to take more social media breaks than ever before because I feel like there's just information overload. And I think whenever we are overstimulated with social media or any kind of media, or overstimulated in any way, it causes more mental health and anxiety. It makes us anxious because we just weren't made to take in that much information. And I think it's really important to have social media detox days where you just stay off of social media for however many days you need to each week. And whenever you are on social media, I think really evaluate the stuff that you're putting into your mind and making sure that you're not consuming a lot of fear-driven things. You're not consuming a lot of things that cause anxiety. And that also goes back to the triggers, but knowing your triggers, knowing the things that make you anxious, and not allowing those things in your life. I don't think we can completely block out everything and just put our head in the sand and act like everything's perfect in the world, but I think taking things in doses is much better than drinking from the fire hose. So I think understanding that for yourself and knowing the things that are triggering to you and the things that make you anxious, and figuring out how you can engage because there's a lot of important conversations going on right now online. So I think it's understanding how you can engage in those conversations in a healthy way. And that means taking care of your mental health first so that you can come back to those things at the right time when you're in the right headspace and not reacting out of emotion. So I think that it's really important to evaluate your social media use, put different boundaries in place for social media, and then also think about that whenever you're posting on social media as well. Think about how it's affecting other people's mental health and that type of thing as well. So I hope that that's helpful. I feel like that was a lot of information, but at the end of the day, I just want to let you know that there is hope, that you will get through this, and that you're not alone in your struggle, and that God has a place in all of this as well, and He cares so deeply for you. He cares deeply about your mental health, and He wants you to seek Him as well. And I think it's really important to make sure you're seeking God, that you're going deeper in your relationship with Him, and that He's right there with you in the struggle, and to know that people all throughout the Bible struggled with mental health as well. You see David struggled with mental health. You see Elijah. You see Job. You see so many different people who struggled all throughout the Bible on mental health. So know that you are not alone. You matter. You make a difference in this world. God has a purpose for you in this world. He put you here for a reason. You are loved. And no matter what you struggle with in life, you will be able to get through it. And I hope that you have the right community around you to love on you. And just know that you matter to this world, and know that there are so many resources online to help you. And if you ever have any struggles or questions, feel free to reach out to me at hello@thetrailblazerjournals.com, or reach out to me on Instagram at CourtHopeWilson. I would love to point you in the right direction or offer you prayer or anything I can do to help you as well. But I hope that you feel met in this episode. I will be definitely getting some different people on here in the future, different guests that can help speak into this as well. But I hope that you guys have a great week. Please know you're not alone in any of the things you're struggling with, and that you are not weak because you struggle with this. If anything, you're stronger for admitting your struggles and choosing to overcome them. So I hope you have a great week. Be sure to connect with us. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast. Please leave a review if you haven't done so, because that helps other people get to know us and get to hear more of our episodes. And I hope to see you here next week. Bye, guys.